UK than in the EU for the first time since records began.
One of the reasons why we have a challenge when it comes to youth participation in the labour market is because of the broken welfare system and the broken support system that we inherited from the previous government. The proportion of young adults who are not in education, employment or training is broadly unchanged since the general election. It's too high and it has to come down. That's why we are reforming our system, providing more support through actions such as our jobs guarantee. That is the right approach, as is the approach that we're taking on business rates too.
Mr. Speaker, I hosted a hospitality roundtable in North East Fife recently, and you would think an area that boasts such attractions as St Andrews and the East Neuk would find an industry in rude health, but that was not the case. Indeed, one business could not attend because they were taking difficult decisions in relation to their business that day. Now, the Minister's outlined a number of things that are the purview of the devolved government, and I'll be taking those up with the Scottish Government. But as a Scottish MP and as representing Scottish businesses, I'm looking for things that the Government can be doing on a UK level. An emergency VAT cut to hospitality is something we've been proposing for some time. Why won't the Government consider it?
Business rates is a devolved matter, and the changes that we have announced, the support that we've put in, will have consequentials for funding for the Scottish Government. On VAT, it is a broad-based tax that does raise a significant amount of revenue for the Treasury, and that is important when it comes to making sure we can manage our public finances, bringing in the revenue to be able to get borrowing down, which is something that this government is doing and previous governments failed to do. And I would just mention on VAT, when the Liberal Democrats last had the chance, their choice was to put it up rather than cut it.
Dr. Danny Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many businesses in Winchester I speak to on a regular basis, so obviously talk about the higher energy costs, the national insurance rises, but also many bring up the increased red tape because of the Conservatives' failed Brexit project. And businesses in Winchester say they really want growth, not continued red tape. And one is RGM International, just off the High Street, who I was speaking to about 2 weeks ago. For some reason, the government refuses to even consider reducing trade barriers with the EU by having a bespoke customs union. If industry wants it, the publicly increasingly support it. Why won't the government even assess the economic case for a customs union? And why are they clinging to a failed ideology at the expense of growing our economy?
Minister, that was rather well.
This government is fully committed to resetting our relationship with the European Union. The previous government, as he highlighted, did do as much as they could to damage that relationship, damage our productivity and damage our working relationship with our nearest partners. We are seeking to change that. We are negotiating an SPS agreement. We're looking at electricity and energy and what more we can do to deepen our trading relationship, because we know it will be good for productivity. We know it will be good for jobs. And people said that we couldn't make progress with the EU and with the US, but we didn't have to choose. Instead, we're making progress with trading partners across the world.
Mr. Speaker, property valuations in York are particularly high, making it very difficult for businesses, as the Minister knows, not least this year, but certainly leading over the next 3 years. So can the Minister say exactly when he's going to be launching his consultations on pubs, on hotels, on business rates, and of course on the high street? And would he be willing to come and meet with businesses in York to hear why they're struggling with the decisions of this government?
Minister Trickott.
We will be working across government on the high streets strategy, Mr. Speaker. That's something I and ministers in the Treasury will be working with those in the MHCLG department and in Department for Business and Trade as well. And we will make progress on that in the coming weeks with the strategy to report by the end of the year. We're in the process of working on the details of the plans for the review for the methodology for pubs and for hotels, and I'll be happy to engage with my honourable friend and members from across the House on that important work so that we can get the way that pubs are valued and hotels on a more firm footing for the future.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's business rate relief package for pubs has been hugely welcome, but other high street businesses in the retail, leisure and hospitality sectors are struggling. Will the Minister consider increasing the small business rate relief threshold to encourage growth and hiring? Over half of high street small businesses surveyed by the Federation of Small Businesses say they would be in a position to invest in or grow their business if the threshold was increased.
I thank my honourable friend for her question. Around 1 in 3 businesses continue to benefit from the small business rates relief, and don't pay any business rates at all, with an additional around 85,000 benefiting from reduced relief as this is tapered away. We also, at the budget, announced changes to small business rates relief so we can provide an additional 2 years of support for those businesses seeking to expand into a second property, to support those businesses to grow and to support their communities and jobs.
Sonny Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Traders like Sukhvinder Singh, who owns Little Italy in Dudley, tell me how low footfall, empty shops and shoplifting are putting people off from coming to the town centre. Will the right honourable friend set out what action he's taking on business rates and targeted reliefs to help bricks and mortar businesses compete and prosper?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for her question and for her representation of Little Italy in her fantastic constituency. We are working on the High Streets strategy because she's right to highlight that there have been some long-term trends, be that the impact of the pandemic and the impact of the shift to online retail, that means that we need to look at this in the whole. On taxation and on business rates in particular, we have for the first time provided a wedge in the system so that the tax rate paid by the online giants for their warehouses is a third higher than the tax rate paid by the smallest businesses on the high street, with a significantly higher multiplier for those larger ones than the smaller ones on her high street. But we will keep looking at this and at what more we can do to support businesses across the tax system.
Daisy Cooper, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Small businesses are the backbone of our economy, but the Federation of Small Businesses is warning that in April, small businesses will face a cost cliff edge because of the cumulative impact of all of the new taxes and responsibilities being put on small businesses at the same time. During the course of the finance bill, we Liberal Democrats have repeatedly called for an assessment of the cumulative impact of taxes on hospitality and small businesses, including on business rates. So when the government brings forward its high street strategy, will it include an assessment of the cumulative impact of all tax changes? Yes or no?
Yeah. Minister.
When we bring forward the High Street strategy, Mr. Speaker, it will look in the round at what more we can do when it comes to regulation, when it comes to licensing, when it comes to the decisions that are made in the Treasury to continue to support small businesses and those on our high streets. That is an incredibly important thing, and it's something that we will continue to look at very closely.
Pete Colgan.
Question 3.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, through the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill, the government is introducing a strong new community right to buy. This will empower communities to take ownership of and protect local assets. Alongside these new powers, the Pride in Place programme will provide up to £5.8 billion over 10 years to support 284 neighbourhoods, enabling local people to choose to fund a range of activities, including developing or restoring important community assets.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 14 years of Conservative austerity, many communities like mine have been hollowed out of the assets that matter most to them. I welcome the government's community right to buy because putting local people in control of local assets is simply common sense. In my constituency, Woodgate and Bartley Green will receive 20 million through Pride in Place funding over the next decade, thanks to this government. Does the Minister agree that tackling barriers like access to finance will help communities take ownership of local assets and rebuild neighbourhoods?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right that Pride in Place funding can of course be used for communities to take ownership of and support local assets, from youth centres to libraries and cultural venues. I'm very glad to hear that the funding will make such a positive difference to her constituents in Woodgate and Bartley Green, and I am proud that this government is putting people in control of what happens in their local area.
Bob Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Across my Bicester and Woodstock constituency, there are 3 things that small villages tend to have: a pub, a church and a village hall. The community asset policy will support community ownership of the pubs. But what I'm hearing from those who run large faith buildings is they're deeply concerned about the changes to VAT relief on listed buildings. Will the Minister agree to meet with me and the others who are literally trying to repair the church roof in order to discuss this uncertainty?
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable gentleman will be aware, this is a scheme which is operated by DCMS, so I'm happy to ask colleagues in that department to come back to him.
Rivera Adam.
Question 4, Mr. Speaker.
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to answer this question together with question 9. Stability is the most important thing we can do to get interest rates and inflation down, and tackling the cost of living, especially given the global headwinds, is my top priority. At the budget, we took money off energy bills and we froze prescription charges and train fares. The government's cheaper fuel finder scheme is now online too, and it shows petrol prices at forecourts across the country. Yesterday, some petrol retailers charged almost 180p per litre, while others were charging less than 130p per litre. This government will not tolerate price gouging, and I will be meeting with petrol retailers this week to raise concerns to get prices down at the pumps for all of our constituents.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Trussell Trust's recent Hunger in the UK report highlights the startling reality of food insecurity, finding that rates are higher for private renters in receipt of housing benefit, either through local housing allowance or the housing element of universal credit. Private renters on the lowest incomes can't keep up with the rising cost of living, and this risks driving even more into hunger and homelessness if the freeze is maintained, because private renters receiving LHA will likely see an average shortfall of £243 a month. The government has taken meaningful steps towards tackling food insecurity. Will the Chancellor build on this by lifting the freeze on local housing allowance?
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. The comes in the next month or so, and that will make a big difference to her constituents and all of our constituents who are contending with living in the private rented sector, and particularly issues like evictions, but also mid-term rent increases. At the same time, we've put £39 billion into our social and affordable homes programme so that more people can get a council house or a social home rather than living in the private rented sector. As well as that, we are getting rid of the 2-child limit, which the Trussell Trust says will reduce demand on food banks.
Michael Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whilst cost of living pressures are affecting people across my constituency of Worsley and Eccles, young families are facing a perfect storm. Whether it's housing costs, expensive childcare or student loans, many young families are struggling. And research shows that the cost of living crisis is holding people back from even starting a family. In addition to welcome moves to expand free childcare, will the Chancellor outline what measures the government is taking to alleviate the financial burdens on young families?
Chancellor.
We absolutely recognise the pressures facing families. Bringing stability back to the economy is the #1 thing that we can do for working families. There have been 6 cuts in interest rates since the general election, which means the average cost of servicing a mortgage has come down by about £1,300 a year. And for those living in rented accommodation, the Renters' Rights Act comes in shortly to give greater rights to those people in the private rented sector. The free childcare offer, which is now fully funded, ensures that parents with children aged between 9 months and 5 years get free childcare if they are in work. And of course, from next month, the end of the 2-child benefit limit will lift 450,000 children out of poverty.
And Stuart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Richard from Beverley tells me that he paid £304 for his last tank of heating oil, and yet if he orders again now, and he needs to do so within 4 weeks, it'll cost him £862. Families across rural areas like Beverley and Holderness rely on heating oil to keep warm, and yet because they're off-grid, of course, they get no protection from the energy price cap. There are 1.5 million people, Mr. Speaker, across the country in that same position. So what steps can the Chancellor take to ensure that rural families like Richard's, who are facing a huge spike in costs of living through no fault of their own, can see that alleviated?
Chancellor.
I thank the honourable gentleman for that question. The first thing I would say is that everybody gets the support on their electricity bill, regardless of how they heat their homes. But I do recognise the unique issues in the Middle East, because that is heating oil or prices at the pumps.
Kirsty Black.
Inflation at the pumps might be lower than the Tories promised, but they're still higher than they were. Energy costs are still not down to what the government promised in its manifesto. Will the Chancellor recognise that families are really struggling at the moment and put in an emergency package of measures to support families through the cost of living crisis?
Chancellor.
Well, in April, people are going to get £150 off their energy bills. Prescription charges in England will be frozen, and rail fares will be frozen as well. At the same time, we're getting rid of the two-child benefit cap, which lifts 450,000 children out of poverty. The most important thing we can do around petrol prices, diesel prices, and heating oil is to de-escalate the conflict in the Middle East and get vessels moving again through the Strait of Hormuz, which is why this government is putting such efforts into de-escalating this crisis.
Steve Witherden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The level of poverty 14 million people in the UK face is not inevitable, but is the result of political choices, and it damages our economy, costing around 75 billion each year. Will my right tax and introducing a 2% wealth tax on assets over 10 million to lift people out of poverty and strengthen public finances?
Chancellor.
In my first budget, I took a number of taxes to changed a number of taxes to ensure that the wealthiest are paying their fair share. We increased capital gains tax. We have reduced the number of tax loopholes, VAT and business rates on private schools, extending the energy profits levy, getting rid of the exemptions for private equity. And in the budget last year, I did more than any Chancellor has ever done to take children out of poverty. And in the course of this Parliament alone, more than 500,000 children will be lifted out of poverty. I'm proud to be the Chancellor that's delivered that.
Pippa Hailing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With tensions in the Middle East pushing up global oil and gas prices again, households are understandably worried that yet another international crisis will mean higher energy bills and a higher cost of living at home. In my constituency of South Cambridgeshire, as we've heard from constituencies around the chamber, there are many rural and semi-rural households who have to use oil for heating. And over the last week, they've seen those prices double. I've heard that the Chancellor is considering potential measures to support them. Will she support the Liberal Democrats' call for 3-month zero rating for VAT on heating oil for all of those residential homes, and other measures to protect them from these just massive spikes and impact on their bills?
There's two things going on in terms of heating oil. First of all, you've got the conflict in the Middle East, which we're trying to de-escalate. And second, you've got price gouging. And the way to deal with that is to ensure that customers are treated fairly and that companies are not ripping off their customers. That is why we've asked the CMA to look at the issues around heating oil. But we've got to get to the root of the problem, which is that vessels aren't flowing through the Straits of Hormuz, and some businesses are using this crisis as an opportunity to rip off consumers. Let's deal with that rather than throwing public money at something which is not the solution. Price gouging and getting oil flowing is.
James Wells, Shadow Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor promised in her first budget that she would not extend the freeze and income tax thresholds, as it would hurt working people and take more money out of their pay slips. In her second budget, the Chancellor broke her promise with a £23 billion tax rise, bringing 1 million more people into paying higher rate tax. When people are set to struggle with cost of living over this Parliament, why is the government choosing to make their lives harder?
Some people have got short memories, haven't they, Mr. Speaker? I remember on a number of occasions the Conservatives freezing those thresholds. We said in our manifesto we would not increase the headline rates of national insurance, VAT and income tax that working people pay. But I did say very clearly at the budget last year that we'd have to ask everyone to make a greater contribution because of the downgrade in productivity, which is a result of the mismanagement of the economy of the last government over 14 failed years.
John Glenn.
Number 5, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, at the spring forecast last week, my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, showed that we have the right economic plan, a plan that has lowered inflation, borrowing, debt and debt interest payments. Our approach means that investment is up, helping create the conditions for growth across the UK, and our firm approach to public spending is helping to keep public finances on a sustainable path.
Thank the Chief Secretary for his answer, but given the Chancellor has pencilled in 0.3% real terms growth in 29-30 in public spending, and assuming health is spent at a historic average, send as per the proposals, and defence at 3%, it will leave a 2.5% real terms cut in unprotected departments. What plans does the Chancellor and Chief Secretary have to fill that 13 billion gap in the 29-30 envelope?
Mr. Speaker, if the right honourable gentleman looks at the plans that we set out through our spending review, he will be clear that we are increasing spending by £50 billion a year by 28-29 compared to the plans of the previous government. At the same time, we are making sure that taxpayers get value for money, and so we are making £3.9 billion of efficiency savings by 29-30, rising to £5 billion by 30-31.
Richard Fuller-Shillings.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, the government spending plans look very, very iffy. The minister has the chance of fitting in the Chancellor's fiscal rules if there is no further downgrade to economic growth, which seems unlikely. If the government has the backbone to rein in public spending and to increase taxes in the last years, which seems very unlikely. If the government does not have to step in with any significant energy support because no money has been set aside, and if the government can get 4.8 billion in salary sacrifice in 29-30 revenues, which the industry says is a pipe dream. So here's another if. If the minister's spending plans start to fall apart, will he prioritise cuts in public spending over tax increases?
I'll give the right honourable gentleman an if. If he was honest and remembered his time in Liz Truss's government, he might not have the gall to make comments like that across the dispatch box.
All members are honest. Please think about what you're saying. You can't individually attack a member for not being honest. They're all honourable members, as you well know. Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I apologise unreservedly for the implication about the right honourable gentleman. I know he is a very decent and honourable man, and I withdraw that comment. He may have unintentionally misled the House by failing to declare his part in the distrust government and the impact that had on public spending. But of course, Mr. Speaker, as he will also know, we have stuck to the fiscal rules that this Chancellor introduced at the beginning of this government in every fiscal event that we have had. Those fiscal rules are ironclad. We have sustainable plans for public spending, and we're making sure we're managing the economy in a way that his party could only dream of.
Catherine West.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Question 7.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, under Tory governments of the last 14 years, we became inured to the presence of food banks. But we should always remember that despite the incredible work that those running food banks do, food banks should not need to exist. And this government is committed to ending mass dependence on food parcels. That's why we've expanded free school meals to all families receiving universal credit and removed the two-child limit, which will lift 450,000 children out of poverty and which, as the Chancellor referred to earlier, the Trussell Trust says will significantly reduce the number of families using food banks.
West.
The Honourable Minister for her reply, and would she agree with me that everyone needs to play their part, including financial institutions, in helping families and households at this critical juncture, including, for example, the mutual sector, which often outperforms the private banking sector in terms of access to finance and branch closure issues?
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for her question. As she knows, we're a very strong supporter indeed of the mutual sector for exactly the reasons that she highlights. And as part of our financial inclusion strategy, we're backing the sector with initiatives such as the new £30 million Credit Union Transformation Fund and reforms to the Common Bond, which I'm looking forward to bringing forward shortly.
Alex Easton.
Mr. Speaker,
Will the Chancellor first join in with me in paying tribute to the work of the food banks, not only in my constituency of North Down, but across the whole United Kingdom, for stepping up and plug systematic gaps for families? And does she accept that urgent improvements are needed to benefit transitions and deductions to prevent households being pushed abruptly into crisis?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to the honourable member for his question. As I said, food banks should not need to exist, and that's why this government is committed to ending mass dependence on food parcels. I highlighted the importance of lifting the two-child limit in universal credit. That will result in the largest expected reduction in child poverty across a single parliament since records began.
Nick Smith. Number 8, please, Mr. Speaker. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for his question. Payments of both the basic and the new state pension will increase by 4.8% in April in just a few weeks' time, boosting pensioners' incomes by up to £575 a year. The yearly amount of the full new state pension is projected to go up by around £2,100 over this Parliament, reflecting this government's commitment to the triple lock for its duration.
Mr. Speaker, this is great news. Our pensioners deserve the best support and will be glad of the extra income. In Blaenau Gwent and Rumney, I'm shortly organising events promoting pensions credit take-up. Mr. Speaker, some pension constituents, though, of mine have lost money to the Safe Hands funeral scheme, trying to prepare for the worst of times. Will the Minister please meet me to discuss their case?
Well, I should thank my honourable friend on both counts. One, because I'm glad to hear that he is again, as he did last year, organising events to drive up take-up of pension credit, and I know that members on both sides of this House will be doing that throughout the year. Directly on the question he raises about the failure of Safe Hands, he's a powerful advocate again for his constituents. My honourable friend will know that the Serious Fraud Office have recently announced 2 individuals have been charged in relation to this case, and there are live criminal proceedings ongoing. But I know my honourable friend, the Economic Secretary, who is responsible for this matter, is always happy to meet with him.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nearly 500,000 pensioners living abroad will miss out on the state pension increase because we do not have reciprocal agreements with countries such as Canada and Australia. Several former Bath constituents have raised this with me. What discussions has he had with departmental colleagues to rectify this injustice?
Minister.
Well, I thank the honourable member for her question. She'll know that this is a matter of long-standing government policy, that the uprating of pensions are prioritised for those residents in the UK, not least because the uprating levels reflect the path of earnings and prices in the UK. She'll know that under the Liberal Democrat Conservative coalition government, that was the government's policy, and it remains the case today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thanks to this government's policies on pensions that actively disincentivise saving into private pension schemes, people will increasingly rely on the support of the state. This is not sustainable. So I asked the Minister yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and he dodged the question. So I will ask him the question again. Will the government cancel pension fund mandation, and will the government abandon salary sacrifice caps? Yes or no?
Yeah. Well, this government set out its policy, but directly on the question of salary sacrifice that he raises, I would just say to the honourable member that any responsible government should be looking at the effectiveness of all tax release. Salary sacrifice for pensions, if it had not been reformed, the cost of it would have risen to £8 billion over the course of this Parliament. That is the cost of the entire Royal Air Force. And if the party opposite wants to be treated like a serious party, committed to fiscal discipline as it claims to be, it's time to grow up.
From Ben.
Sorry, 10, I think.
10.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. The government recognises the important contribution hospitality businesses make to communities across the UK, including in Northern Ireland. Reduced VAT rates or applying different VAT rates within the UK would add complexity, Mr. Speaker, and come at a significant cost to the Exchequer.
As well as those business pressures, a majority of households in Northern Ireland and many businesses use home heating oil as their main heating source, so they are particularly exposed to shocks like that which we're experiencing from the wrong-headed conflict in the Middle East, and they're not protected by the energy price cap. The Stormont executive has failed to regulate in this area or to make any meaningful progress towards a transition to sustainable and secure energy. What interventions can Treasury make for those who aren't on the grid against extreme price fluctuations?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for her question and her representation of her constituents. The Chancellor has already said today and yesterday that we understand that there are particular pressures facing those households that use heating oil for their heating. A meeting has been arranged tomorrow with the Financial Secretary to the Treasury that I hope that the honourable member will be able to attend to discuss this issue in more detail. We are also going to be in conversations with the CMA to make sure that we have a fair market that provides a fair price for her constituents.
Colin Lockhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support the honourable member's call for a cut in VAT for the hospitality sector, but she is right. Oil prices are rising sharply, fuel at the pumps is rocketing, and families are struggling with the cost of living. In Northern Ireland, 60% of homes rely on heating oil. What steps will the Treasury take to cut fuel duty and remove VAT on domestic heating oil? And will it finally recognise the damage being done by the Energy Secretary's net zero zeal in blocking further oil and gas licensing in the North Sea?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to fuel duty, we have made sure to freeze fuel duty since we've taken office. That's saved the average driver at 8p at the pump, and that will rise to 11p when the increase doesn't go ahead in a few weeks' time. On heating oil, I hope that if it's an issue that I understand affects her constituents, she'll be able to attend the meeting tomorrow. We're looking very closely at this issue and at the changes that we can see in oil and gas prices at the moment. As the right honourable member, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, said yesterday, it is too early to tell how things will pan out. We've seen significant increases and today decreases, and we will keep looking closely at what we can do.
Tracy Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A number of hospitality businesses in my England North and Leith constituency have raised with me that the UK's rate of VAT is much higher than it is in France and Germany. Well, my honourable friend asked will be able to model the impact of cuts in the VAT could have, as previously studies have suggested, are cuts.
It's a Northern Ireland question.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Slosh Rachel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for his response, and I have to declare an interest because I started a parliamentary petition on exactly a VAT cut for hospitality for Northern Ireland. The reason being, we have the Republic of Ireland, a very competitive VAT rate right up against us. Businesses saw the official government response because that petition got over 10,000 signatures. They felt very despondent. I'm sure the Treasury frontbench and indeed the Chancellor will want to join with me in trying to do everything we can to protect our hospitality sector. So you say it's complex to do. Would you agree with me that it's worth revisiting that idea?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is a complex change to implement, and the government's position is that it's right to have the same rate of VAT across our country. During the pandemic, there was a cut to the rate of VAT, a temporary cut, and that did come at a significant cost of £8 billion. So we do have to make sure that we are able to raise revenue from across the country in a fair and consistent way to support the public finances.
Question number 11, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I'll answer this question together with question 18. Last week, the Office of Budget Responsibility set out their updated forecast for the UK economy, including for unemployment to peak this year before falling each and every year thereafter. There have been longer-term problems building for young people in our labour market for far too long, with employment rates that are too low and NEET levels that have soared in the last Parliament. We will not allow a generation of young people to be left behind. That is why the government has committed £820 million for the Youth Guarantee, strengthening employment support and guaranteeing jobs for the long-term unemployed.
Mr. Speaker, when I first entered the job market, it was in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, and it was a difficult time for young people. Yet today they face even more difficult and uncertain times. The Chancellor's jobs tax is bearing down on opportunities, but also AI is making this worse, potentially pulling up the ladder on graduate jobs that would previously include things like note-taking and supporting senior employees in meetings. So will the Chancellor course correct on unemployment for young people and do more to support their progress in their careers?
Minister.
Well, I thank the honourable member for his question. Actually, his phrasing of it is very telling about the challenges that we all do face in our labour market, because while we've seen more jobs created over the last year, there is this longer-term challenge with youth unemployment. And if we look at the last government, we never saw youth employment rates recover to the levels seen under the last Labour government after the financial crisis, given the exact experience he's talked about himself. So it is important we grapple with this long-term challenge. There's then a newer challenge on the huge increase in NEET rates that we saw under the last Parliament specifically. So on both of those, we absolutely do need to focus on it. That's why we're setting about focusing apprenticeship funding on young people in particular. It's why we're introducing the youth guarantee, and it's why we've got the independent review led by Alan Milburn to focus on the root causes of some of these challenges.
Matthew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's changes to employer national insurance contributions has made it more expensive for employers to take on staff, particularly in the hospitality sector that employs a high proportion of young people and part-time workers. Does the Minister agree that these changes have made it more difficult for young people in Melksham and Devizes and across the country to get a foot on the career ladder and get their working lives started? Thank you.
Minister.
Well, I think all of us recognise that our hospitality and retail sectors have been having a difficult time in recent years. In the case of retail, that goes back before the pandemic with the growth of online shopping, and the squeeze on energy costs in the outrun of the pandemic has squeezed how much people are spending out in hospitality. Specific on the question he raises about national insurance, I mean, I'm sure the honourable member is aware that those under the age of 21 and youth apprenticeships are exempt from national insurance entirely. And I would just gently point out that the pattern we see in the labour market for youth employment long predates any change to national insurance last year.
Select Committee, Dan Benkadir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that the government is introducing things like the youth guarantee and working on those who are not in education, employment or training. Yeah. But as the honourable member for Henley and Tame highlighted, AI is also an increasing concern. When I've spoken to businesses, they're concerned about the number of people they won't be employing in the future. The Minister's hinted at this, the government's looking at this systemically. What conversations is he having across government and crucially with businesses so that we can plan for what could be a real crisis in the future?
Minister.
Well, I thank the honourable friend for her question. She's been rightly raising this issue for some time, actually predating the election. To take two parts of her question in turn, directly on the question of the impact of AI, this is a question being looked at across countries. There is a unit inside the government looking at exactly that, but more importantly, on the crisis happening now to some young people who are not able to get the job opportunities we all want them to have and haven't been now for some time, we will be coming forward with further measures to strengthen that youth guarantee that she's rightly mentioned. This is a really important measure to increase the employment support available to our young people and to make sure that a job guarantee is there for those that are long-term unemployed.
Trickett.
Thank you very much, sir. The situation of unemployment in my constituency and across the Yorkshire coalfield is becoming a crisis. There are 1,980 people out of work in my constituency, 70 jobs, 70 vacancies, so almost 30 people unemployed pursuing every single job. Now, no Labour minister will ever say employment is a price worth paying, but will the minister say to the House that he will equally prioritise both tackling unemployment as well as reassuring the bond markets?
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend and I have discussed these issues on many occasions, particularly as they're specific to his constituency, but also to other coalfield communities. I would just say to him that there are challenges. There's a particular challenge on youth employment, as I say, that goes back to the last decade in particular, but we absolutely do need to prioritise that. But I would just a word of warning on the view of the overall labour market. There are only, if you look at the level of employment last year at around 75%, there are only 2 years in peacetime in the last 100 when Britain has had a higher employment rate than that. So I think we should just be a bit careful about talking down the resilience of the UK economy, in this case, the resilience of the labour market. As I say, only 2 years in the last 100 in peacetime when Britain has had a higher employment rate than it did last year.
Richard Fuller,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, the Times reported that the government may drop its pledge on minimum wage equalisation over youth jobless fears. And the BBC reports that the government is considering a delay. So can the Minister advise whether the government has considered any such delay or policy changes, and if so, what decision has been reached?
Minister. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I also want to offer my condolences to the honourable member for the loss of his father in the recent past. That's something that all of us have to face at some point in our lives, but it is a lot to deal with, and all our thoughts are with him at that time. Specifically on the point he raises, no, there isn't a change in government policy. Our view is that you should see alignment of the national minimum wage rates and the national living wage, but that should happen in the right way, and that's with the guidance of the Low Pay Commission, and they'll continue to play that important role.
Right, we come to topicals. Daniel Francis.
Topic number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The conflict in the Middle East affects all of us, and I understand the anxiety felt by families and businesses. Rapid de-escalation in the Middle East is the best way to protect businesses and working people from rising costs. That's why I continue to work closely with G7 colleagues to call for immediate de-escalation and to guarantee the security of vessels moving through the Strait of Hormuz. I'm clear-eyed about the situation we face. I'll be both responsive to a changing world and also responsible in the national interest to protect public finances and to help families and businesses with the cost of living.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for her comments and support and echo what she said about the situation in the Middle East. The charity Shelter has long campaigned for people with no fixed address to access bank accounts, including without ID. Which groups of people might benefit from the most from leadership shown by the Labour government and from banks on this issue?
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and I also want to pay tribute to my honourable friend, the Economic Secretary to the Treasury, for all of the excellent work that she's done to take this agenda forward. Lack of a bank account does make it harder for people to secure stable employment and indeed stable housing. That's why our financial inclusion strategy secured a commitment from the major banks to work with Shelter directly to make it easier for people without standard ID to access a bank account. And this partnership with Shelter will particularly help to break the cycle of homelessness and support people to rebuild their lives, as we all want to see.
Shall the Chancellor Samel stride?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for every single year of the last Conservative government, we froze fuel duty, and we did that to stand up for hard-working families. So could I ask the right honourable lady, given that petrol is surging at the pumps, why has she chosen now to put up fuel duty?
Chancellor.
Freezing it in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, as the right honourable gentleman knows, the plans that we inherited from the previous government saw fuel duty due to go up just a few months after the general election. We didn't think that that was the right approach, and so we reversed the Conservative plans that we inherited to freeze fuel duty and to keep in the 5p discount introduced during the pandemic. In April this year, under the plans I inherited, of course, fuel duty would have gone up again. We don't think that is the right thing to do. And so in a staggered approach from the autumn this year, the 5p cut introduced during the pandemic will begin to be unwound. But at the same time, we've just introduced the cheaper fuel finder. The cheaper fuel finder showed yesterday the divergence in prices paid by customers at petrol forecourts. Some people paid 130p a litre yesterday, some people paid 180p per litre. So it is really, really important that people use that cheaper fuel finder to shop around. And I'll be meeting petrol retailers later this week to make the case very clear that we won't accept price gouging.
Mr.
Speaker, given the rapidly rising cost of oil and gas, why does the right honourable lady believe that it is better to import it than to extract it from the North Sea?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the price of oil and gas at the moment is particularly volatile given the conflict in the Middle East. But my understanding when we came into the chamber, at least today, was that prices of oil were down by something like 25% on the day. The most important thing that all of us can do to deal with what is happening to prices at the moment is to support de-escalation. That is this party's policy. I'm not frankly sure what the policy of the party opposite is. But that is the best way to get down both the price of petrol at the pumps and also heating oil. The North Sea will play a really important part of our energy mix for many years to come, which is why I met with North Sea oil and gas companies just last week to talk about what more they could do and how we can help.
Total Crichton.
Speaker, when it comes to the rising cost of living, can I ask the Chancellor to look again at the rural fuel relief scheme? The scheme is meant to give a 5p discount per litre on petrol and diesel in specific island and rural communities, but I've checked, and in Stornoway today in my constituency, petrol is 138.9. In the middle of Glasgow, it's 129.9, 9p cheaper. The scheme works in reverse, with urban drivers having all the advantages of competition and choice. The scheme costs little, but inflation has reduced it by 35%. Can I ask Treasury Ministers to press the accelerator and go an extra mile forward?
Sorry, just to help me, there's a lot of backbenchers didn't get in early. Please, can we just try and speed up, Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for his representations on this matter today over many months and in Westminster Hall just a few weeks ago. The Rural Fuel Duty Relief Scheme does provide that 5p discount, and it will benefit his constituents on the islands and in the communities that he represents. We will, of course, keep all of our taxes under review, and I would be happy to meet with him to talk about this one.
Daisy Cooper, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In times of crisis, the UK government has often had to spend more on energy support for households and small businesses than other comparable countries because our energy market is so broken. Hospitality and small businesses tell me that some suppliers simply refuse to supply hospitality businesses at all. If the government is determined to refuse Liberal Democrat calls for an emergency VAT cut, could I please ask, at the very least, will the government consider our call on the government to instruct the CMA to investigate bad practices in the energy market affecting hospitality and small businesses so we can drive down bills through greater competition?
Well, I thank the honourable lady for her question. She's right to talk about the long-term answer here, which is more domestic energy security, which is why we're getting on with building nuclear power, whether it's in Wilver or it's in Suffolk and Somerset. Specifically on the question she raises, the Chancellor has been very clear, and ministers have been very clear with the CMA on exactly the point that she is raising, that particularly at times like this, we need to make absolutely sure that no companies are taking advantage of customers, whether those are customers filling up their domestic heating oil or hospitality businesses.
Thank you. Following events in the Middle East, can the Chancellor share with us what work is being done both here and alongside our NATO allies and other partners to understand the economic consequences, people's changing needs, and the impact that has on government spending when countries are faced with times of conflict?
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. I am proud to be the Labour Chancellor that has overseen the biggest uplift in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Just last week, we announced £1 billion helicopter deal with Leonardo, based just down the road from my honourable friend in Yeovil. And yesterday, I confirmed to the House that the Ministry of Defence has access to the Special Reserve. This means the additional costs of deploying additional capabilities in the Middle East will be funded entirely by the Treasury's Special Reserve.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a Member of Parliament for one of the largest rural constituencies in the United Kingdom, obviously the rise in heating oil is a major concern, and I welcome the opportunity to meet the Financial Secretary. I hope that LPG can also be on the agenda for that meeting, because that is a heating source for many of my constituents. But people like Craig Ritchie in Symington will be looking for concrete outcomes from that meeting when they've been faced with a 200% rise in their oil costs.
Chancellor.
I thank the honourable gentleman for raising the important issues that his constituents are facing with regards to heating oil. And I very much hope he'll be able to attend the meeting tomorrow. As I say, there are two key issues. First of all, making sure vessels can flow again through the Strait of Hormuz, which requires de-escalation in the crisis, and stopping the price gouging, which some businesses are engaged in at the moment. And that's why I've asked the CMA to look at this too.
Paul Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my constituency, cooperative care Colne Valley is a testament to the value and importance of cooperatives, delivering ethical, not-for-profit home care services for the disabled and elderly, the group's community ownership, local empowerment demonstrates the value of cooperatives. Will the Minister advise me what steps their department is taking to drive the growth of such cooperatives across our communities?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for highlighting the important work of the Colne Valley Care Group, which is an excellent example of how cooperatives can deliver high-quality, community-owned care for elderly and disabled people. And I know that his constituency is home to a number of other fantastic cooperatives, including the Green Valley Grocer and the handmade bakery as well. This government is committed to doubling the size of the co-ops and mutuals sector, Mr. Speaker, exactly because we recognise the very positive role that it plays.
Liz Jarvis.
Mr. Speaker, David, who owns Steamtown Brewery in my constituency of Eastleigh, tells me that his biggest concern right now is inflation and the ability to plan ahead. What reassurance can the Minister give him that businesses in my constituency will be supported with the stability and certainty that they need?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, businesses in the Honourable Lady's constituency and indeed across the country can know that whatever instability we face in the world in the months and weeks ahead, we have done the right thing as a government in terms of the economy to bring down inflation, bring down interest rates, bring down borrowing, bring down debt and bring down debt costs. All of that puts us in the strongest possible position to be resilient going into the future.
I'm calling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Young people in North West Cambridgeshire and across the country are struggling to access mortgages and get onto the housing ladder due to thin credit files. Will the Minister explore requiring lettings agents and large landlords, with the consent of tenants, to report rental payment data to credit reference agencies so that a record of paying rent on time can contribute to tenants' credit histories and help them access mortgages?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his question, and I know how passionate he is about this government's priority to get more first-time buyers onto the housing ladder. As he and I have discussed before, people looking to buy a home can build their credit history through rent payments by using third-party services that report these things to credit reference agencies. But I think he and I would agree that better awareness of these services and indeed the mortgages available that take account of tenants' rental payments would be a good thing.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Even while sitting here, I've heard word from a constituent whose heating oil costs have risen by £129.90 plus VAT per litre in one go. I recognise that the Chancellor has been pressed by a number of members on this, but can she assure us of immediate action as vulnerable residents are in immediate crisis?
Chancellor.
While only 4% of people in Great Britain use heating oil, I recognise it is a particular issue for many constituents, and of course in Northern Ireland it's more than 60%. I'd be very keen that the honourable gentleman takes these issues to the meeting with the Financial Secretary to the Treasury tomorrow, and we are working closely with the Competition and Markets Authority to stop price gouging. There is no reason why a company should be charging twice as much as they were for heating oil, and we need to put a stop to those practices.
Jessica Toe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The junction of Surrey Road and Prince of Wales Road, Wimborne Road between Kinston Library and Bear Cross, and Hankinson Road around Winton Wreck. Some of more than 35 roads in Bournemouth West that residents have told me potholes are out of control. Now, Lib Dem-led BCP Council has been given £7.5 million to maintain our roads and fix potholes. I'll be writing to them later today, but in the meantime, will the Chancellor join me in urging BCP to act and get its act together and finally fix our roads?
Mr. Speaker, as my honourable friend makes clear, we need to make sure our extra funding for local roads maintenance is spent effectively and local residents able to hold councils like Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole to account. I know that the Liberal Democrats have typically not been shy of putting potholes on their leaflets. Now is their time to deliver.
Chancellor said that she would be meeting the North Sea oil industry to see how they can help. The proper question is how she can help them, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Chancellor.
Alongside the budget last year, we published the new North Sea oil and gas strategy, allowing things, for example, like tiebacks to make use of existing fields more. Of course, the previous government brought in the energy profits levy when the profits of the energy companies went through the roof after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That is still in place so that when prices are high, we can bring the money in to help people with their bills.
Lord Hatton. Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Chancellor of the Exchequer's work to get the Leonardo helicopters contract over the line. That will help protect defence jobs right across Dorset, Somerset and the wider South West. Will the Treasury and Ministers continue to work with the MOD to secure and invest in the defence sector in Dorset and across the West Country?
Chancellor.
Thank you to my honourable friend about what he said about the Leonardo contract at Yeovil, which of course supports many thousands of jobs in both Somerset and indeed in Dorset. I'm proud to be the Chancellor that oversaw the biggest uplift in defence spending since the end of the Cold War, which is what enabled us to be able to support this investment and many others as well.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. The £100,000 tax trap means that some residents are paying 71% marginal rates if they have a student loan. And that is one of the reasons why salary sacrifice is so popular. Yet those people want to use the money in the economy now. What is the Chancellor doing to address the tax trap at £100,000?
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable member for his second question, his enthusiastic volume of questions today. Look, what this government does is balance the needs of public services with the tax revenues to sustain them. And I would just gently point out that day in, day out, Liberal Democrat members come to this House and they call for more spending. We've heard that today. And then they oppose every single tax rise or tax change required to make that happen. That is not what serious politics looks like. We do need to take tax very, very seriously, but it's time for some serious politics from the party opposite.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The loan charge was a scandal that affected tens of thousands of people across this country. At the last budget, government put forward changes. Some of those people affected were on very low pay. They weren't given a choice by their employers. Can the Minister please tell us what assessment he has made of how that will impact those people at the lowest end, including social care workers across this country?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for the question and for the representation that she has provided for her constituents and many who've been affected by the loan charge across the country and her work on the APPG. At the budget, we made the decision, Mr. Speaker, to write off £5,000 from everyone's liability who's been affected by the loan charge, which will mean that around a third of those who have been affected will have their liabilities written off entirely. And I look forward to continue to engage with her and members from across the House on this important issue.
Thanks,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following on from that last question, the APPG for the loan charge and taxpayer fairness, which I co-chair, wrote to ministers on the 1st of July, the 22nd of September and the 25th of November last year, with particular questions about the 2005 preferential deal with the large banks. Does the Minister feel it's acceptable that we haven't had a reply to those letters, and when will we get one?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the letters that were sent in will be receiving a reply very shortly. A decision was made that in the run-up to the announcement of the independent loan charge review, that it would not be appropriate for the government to be setting out in detail its views on a live issue that an independent reviewer was looking at in detail. That review was published alongside the budget, and I apologise that the response hasn't come in the week since. It will be with him and the APPG very shortly.
Chris Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 weeks ago, I held an emergency cost of living summit in Blackpool after record numbers of families, particularly single mums, contacted us in food crisis. They couldn't access the discretionary fund that the council holds. So can the Minister outline how the new Crisis and Resilience Fund will be there for families in my constituency who need support, especially over that weekend?
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for his question. He's right to point to the Crisis and Resilience Fund as being an important lifeline for families across this country. We work with local authorities to make sure that it gets to the front line, because local councils are best able to understand where the most acute pressures are in their local area. But I would be happy to discuss this with him after.
Mr.
Speaker, batteries are the only MCS certified clean heat technology excluded
from VAT relief under the energy saving materials framework, penalising smaller homes and lower income households who cannot accommodate a heat pump. Will the Chancellor commit to removing this anomaly and meet me and representatives of the UK heat battery industry to discuss it?
Mr. Speaker, the government regularly assesses whether to add energy-saving materials, including heat batteries, to the current VAT relief that is set to continue till March 2027. Any decisions would have to be announced by the Chancellor at a fiscal event, but I'm of course happy to discuss the matter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Given the global situation, what discussions has the Chancellor had with Cabinet colleagues to help keep industrial energy costs manageable? And will she work with colleagues to bring in the British Industrial Competitiveness Scheme, which will cut manufacturing energy costs by 25% as soon as possible?
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and she's a really powerful advocate for the energy-intensive industries and manufacturing more widely. The supercharger is being extended from April this year, helping 500 of the most energy-intensive businesses, increasing their discount from 60% to 90%. And next year, the big scheme comes in, the British Industrial Competitiveness Scheme. Of course, given what is happening in the Middle East, we'll continue to look very closely at what we can do to help our energy-intensive industries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over 50% of properties in the Scottish borders are not on the mains gas grid, and they are completely dependent on heating oil. They are being hammered by the increasing prices to heating oil over the last week or so. They need to see concrete action from this government to stop the excessive prices and also to stop profiteering. What is the government going to do?
Chancellor.
I absolutely agree with the honourable gentleman. We are trying to de-escalate the conflict in the Middle East, because if we can get those vessels moving again through the Strait of Hormuz, we will deal with a lot of these problems. And so I'm working closely with both Lloyd's of London, who I met yesterday, and also with my G7 colleagues to ensure that those vessels can get moving again. At the same time, I think that everybody has heard the stories, both in this chamber and from our constituents, about the problems of price gouging, and we've got to address this. I've asked the CMA to look at it, and also in more detail, members from all across the House will have a chance tomorrow to set out these cases to the Financial Secretary Treasury, so we have all the information.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My constituents in Newcastle and I are sick and tired of poor quality and dangerous roads. The County Council has the resources from this government and must stop missing in action. So what message does my honourable friend the Minister have for Staffordshire County Council?
Minister.
My honourable friend is absolutely right that we need councils across the country to use the extra funding that the government has made available for local road maintenance to fill those potholes. Local councils will have to publish their data online, and so local people will be able to monitor through a traffic light system available on gov.uk how their council is performing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every year, the UK loses £33.4 billion in tax revenue as multinational corporations and the super rich choose tax havens over tax payments. But the UN Tax Convention has the potential to solve this problem. So will the Minister show leadership, not ambivalence, and commit to securing an ambitious UN Tax Convention in this Parliament?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm always happy to show leadership, and on this issue, this government, and actually, may I say, previous governments have worked hard with international partners, both in the OECD and in the UN, to seek to do all we can to reduce the tax avoidance and evasion that takes place from multinational companies. We continue to work with our partners here in the UK and abroad to make sure that we can clamp down on the tax that is dodged.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent in Rochdale, Louise Marshall, wrote to me this weekend because she's worried sick about the massive price rise she's facing for heating oil. Can the Chancellor assure me, notwithstanding the meeting we're all going to have with the Financial Secretary, can she reassure me that we can be absolutely crystal clear that under this government we won't tolerate price gouging or war profiteering from oil companies that try and rip off their customers?
Chancellor.
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend. The price gouging that we're seeing is totally unacceptable, which is why we have already asked the CMA to look at this. business, whether it is petrol at the pumps or heating oil. There is no excuse for any business to use this as an opportunity to rip off customers.
Jeremy Hunt. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the things that makes our economy less resilient is high levels of debt. And the Chancellor and I both followed fiscal rules that allowed us to claim that debt was falling when in fact it continued to rise, both in absolute terms and as a proportion of GDP. Does she think it's time to consider a new fiscal rule that actually reduces debt, such as saying that public spending won't increase by faster than economic growth? Chancellor.
Thank the right honourable gentleman for that question. In the forecast that I published last week, it shows that debt is lower in every year of the forecast compared to what I inherited, compared to the plans that I set out in the budget just back in November. The fiscal rules that I introduced in the October after I became Chancellor said, first of all, that we have to balance day-to-day spending with tax receipts. That's important, but that subject to getting debt down as a share of GDP, we could invest in the things that can actually grow the economy, because he and I both know that growth is the best way to ensure that our public finances are sustainable and we improve living standards for working people.
Whereas, Mr. Speaker, the government's new industrial strategy has signposted a path to further economic growth and prosperity, but there are certain regions of the UK that can play a significant role in this growth. So would Treasury ministers consider working with DBT to make Cornwall an industrial strategy zone?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. And in the budget last year, we introduced the Kerno Growth Fund to support the Cornish economy because of the specific strengths around critical minerals, defence and also clean energy. The National Wealth Fund and the wider government will do everything we can to unlock those huge opportunities that we know exist in Cornwall.
Final question on it. Dr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the recent IFS report that says the Treasury's excessively narrow focus on fiscal rules leads to dysfunctional policymaking, and given recent global events showing the uncertainty of fiscal forecasting, does the Chancellor recognise that it's time to move to a more flexible and strategic approach to fiscal rulemaking and fiscal policymaking?
Chancellor.
I totally reject the premise of that question. The fiscal rules that I introduced as Chancellor have unlocked £120 billion for capital investment. We're spending £50 billion more on day-to-day spending by the end of this Parliament. But at the same time, we're bringing debt down, bringing the deficit down, bringing inflation down and bringing interest rates down for all of our constituents. Economic stability is the way to grow our economy and make working people in all our constituencies better off. And if you forget that, it is ordinary working people who pay the price.
Right, let the front benches change over.
Hi guys, this is Alex here, one of the founders of Thalassa. I decided to come up with Thalassa Lux Wellness Realm, and this particular outlet as the realm, because of the energy it's throwing out there. When you as a customer come here and step into this particular outlet, it feels like a realm. It feels like you have entered something totally unique with its natural aesthetic walls, textures, its rounded doors, entry, exit doors, plus the natural lighting that falls on you, the aromas that we handpick to help you understand the relaxation, help you feel that you're somewhere else.
Do this.
you.